These are 8 episodes that show Stewie Griffin's greatest moments ever.
Starting at number 8, we've got Mixed Stroke, where Stewie leaves childhood behind and enters his teen years rather early. This episode starts with Stewie and Brian watching One Tree Hill on TV. When he sees how overly serious everyone on the show is, he tells Brian that he can become the most popular kid in high school in a week. Brian obviously wants to watch Stewie fail, so he says that if Stewie can't become the most popular high schooler in a week, he'll have to take a big ol' whip of Meg's hat. Stewie agrees to the bet and whips up a solid plan. He plans to put a wig on and sneaks into school in Meg's backpack, and somehow that plan works brilliantly. Before you know it, Stewie's already in with the cool kids, like he's sitting at the cool table at the cafeteria and everything, with the jocks and cheerleaders eating up his every word. And he doesn't even stop there. The next task on Stewie's agenda is dating the hottest girl in school, Connie, who he asks to go to anal point with her. When she says yes, Stewie's basically already won the bet, and he goes up to Brian the next day to gloat. Brian admits defeat and asks Stewie if he'll be hanging up his wig after his victory. But Stewie's somehow still not done. You see, being popular in high school has given him the kind of high that he just can't give up, and even though he doesn't have a clue what teenagers do up at anal point, Stewie still wanted to go to keep up his popular reputation. And when they arrive there, it doesn't take long for her shirt to come off, and at first, Stewie thinks she's offering him a meal. He quickly realizes that what she actually wants is sex, but he doesn't seem to know how all that grown-up stuff works yet. But regardless, he takes his pants off, and of course, Connie is absolutely shocked by his tiny baby wang, and she laughs him out of the car. Stewie clearly doesn't realize what just happened. He shows up at school the next day expecting to still be one of the cool kids, but everyone just calls him Baby Penis, which is the sort of nickname you never want to live down, even if it's true. Of course, Stewie's not going to let Connie off easy. He goes up to her and asks for one last kiss, and when she bends down to give it to him, he takes his wig and clothes off and has Connie arrested for kissing a baby. Yeah, that's what you kind of get. Literally. At number 7, Pale Stewie reminds us that Stewie's really just a lonely kid who needs a friend that he can spend his whole life with. While trying to take Lois out for about the millionth time, Stewie runs into Hudson, a sweet little boy who reminds Stewie of how much fun it is to be a kid. They play a game of spin in a circle, and while Stewie's initially kind of hesitant, he actually enjoys himself for a change. He even says he likes Hudson when he has to leave, which might just be the first time Stewie said that he likes anyone that isn't a dog named Brian. The next day, he's so excited to meet his new best friend that he's quite literally skipping his way to the park. Brian asks him why he'd want to be friends with a kid when he's such a genius, only for Stewie to say that Hudson's just a cool guy. It turns out that Hudson feels the same way. In fact, he likes Stewie so much that he asks to come over for a play date, leading to some adorable excitement from the little tyke. He asks Brian if Hudson can come over, and Brian agrees, although he's kind of surprised that Stewie actually agreed to play date in the first place. But here's the thing. Stewie might be a little too advanced for the innocent little Hudson. When the kid comes over to play, he suggests playing cops and robbers, pointing a pretend gun at Stewie, who decides to show Hudson the formidable arsenal hidden in his bedroom wall. Hudson is understandably confused and asks Stewie why he has so many guns, to which Stewie tells him that a lot of them are meant to help him kill his mom, which is clearly too much information for the innocent little guy. When Hudson tells him that he can't be his friend if he actually goes through with that, Stewie miraculously agrees to put his violent ways behind him and leave Lois alone. Next thing you know, he's burying his entire arsenal in the dead of the night and telling Brian it's time to say goodbye to evil Stewie. But here's where things get sticky. When Stewie goes to school, he tells all his classmates about his new best friend, but not only do they know him, they are all invited to his birthday party that Stewie had no idea about. This betrayal prompts Stewie to dig up all his weapons, and later on, Brian finds out that he's planning to shoot up Hudson's birthday party. Over at the fun zone, Stewie begins his attack. He pumps sleeping gas into the entire area, knocking everyone out except Hudson, but only because he wants to face him before presumably shooting him with a laser gun. But get this, Hudson actually did invite Stewie to the party, and the only reason he didn't know about it was because Brian threw the invitation away. It turns out he was worried about losing his friendship with Stewie. At number 6, P-Terminator is all about Stewie and Brian's rivalry getting to a destructive new level. This absolutely wild episode is an homage to the Terminator, obviously, with Stewie drawing up plans to make a killer robot that looks exactly like Peter. A P-Terminator, if you will. Why does he do this? Well, because Lois almost made him eat broccoli. which is obviously punishable by death. Now, Stewie admits that the technology to create this robot doesn't exist yet, except that a P-Terminator from the future has already traveled back in time to present-day Quahog. When the robot shows up at the Griffin residence, Stewie immediately knows that this is not the real Batman. He realizes that his future self probably created the machine and sent it back in time to help him kill Lois. How helpful! Except for one small hitch, the Terminator isn't there for Lois, it's there for Stewie. Just when the robot pulls out a shotgun, Brian whisks Stewie away. They hide in his bedroom and barricade the door, where Stewie theorizes that some future enemy of his stole the robot and sent it back in time to kill him as a baby. He grabs some guns from his secret vault and starts climbing down the window with the special Mario Lopez sheets just as the Terminator breaks down the door. Stewie and Brian then make a run for it on Stewie's tricycle, but the Terminator steals Joe's new electric wheelchair and follows them in hot pursuit. The two fugitives hide out in a motel, but it does not take long for the robot to catch up to them. As the Terminator points the shotgun at Stewie's face, Brian steps in front of him. The gun is suddenly pulled away. When Brian asks why, the Terminator reveals that he is the one that programmed him to kill Stewie. Yep, Brian's the future enemy that sent the robot after Stewie, but he has absolutely no idea how they became enemies. Borrowing the portal gun from Rick and Morty, the pair head to the year 2060, where they see armies of Stewie and Brian-shaped robots battling it out. They also end up running into their future selves. Future Stewie reveals that the whole war started after Brian left a sarcastic comment on an Instagram post, which makes about as much sense as anything else on this show. Stewie and Brian then head back to the present, where they vow to protect their friendship to prevent that war-torn future and decide to make a run for it. Unfortunately, a Lois-shaped Terminator also happens to be after them, and she starts fighting with the decapitated P-Terminator. Before you can say hasta la vista, a bunch of other Terminators show up as well, and Stewie and Brian have to make a run for it once again. They realize that the only way to stop this is to seal their love forever with a kiss. And wouldn't you know it, all the killer robots start disappearing as soon as they lock lips. What a great show. At number 5, Stewie becomes a celebrity in The Peanut Butter Kid, and boy does he regret it. Peter and Lois aren't exactly great at managing their finances, and they realize in this episode that if they want Stewie to go to college, they need to start thinking ahead. Peter has the bright idea to use a metal detector to help find some cash, but that works about as well as you'd expect. Eventually, the Griffins head to the mall to return the troublesome tool, where they find a line of parents hoping to get their toddlers cast in a peanut butter commercial. That's when Stewie decides to make fun of the time Brian got into some expired peanut butter in the trash, and weirdly enough, his shenanigans are exactly what the ad execs are looking for. He actually ends up appearing on TV, although unfortunately the ad airs during Two Broke Girls, but a whole crowd of the Griffins' friends show up to support Stewie anyway. The commercial is pretty standard, and Stewie doesn't do much apart from acting like an idiot with peanut butter all over his face. That might sound dumb, but the next day the Griffins find out that Stewie earns $2,000 every time the commercial airs. Now, the whole point was to save for Stewie's college fund, keep in mind, but Peter and Lois decide to blow the cash on a fancy dinner instead. Their excuse is that Stewie has another audition lined up, so they assume that this is the start of a high-paying career for their youngest kid. But when they get to the audition, they find out that there's tons of competition. And this isn't like the mall. No, everyone here has experience, so Stewie's up for a real challenge this time. Unfortunately, he fails to do anything exceptional when asked, which leads Peter and Lois to getting so annoyed at him that they resort to some pretty drastic measures. That night, Brian wakes up to the sound of piano music, and when he heads down to investigate, he finds out that Peter and Lois are basically forcing Stewie to dance until he drops, even giving him cocaine to keep him awake. The crazy thing is, it actually works, with Stewie landing his second commercial gig the very next day, although he does seem to be going off the rails a bit. The sad thing is, none of that money is going into Stewie's college fund. Instead, Peter and Lois decide to use it to buy anything from a new fridge to a voice-activated 3D printer. As for Stewie, he's been run pretty ragged by all the pressure, and when Brian shows him just how horrible the future of a child actor can be, he wants out fast. While on set for his next commercial, Stewie sabotages the whole thing by grabbing an actress's rack and trying, but failing, to pee in the orange juice. This leads to him getting fired, but on the bright side, Peter and Lois think he's having a breakdown and realize what terrible parents they've been. At number 4, High School English, Stewie goes through an insane trip across time. Peter decides to take us all on a tour of American literary classics in this episode, starting with The Great Gatsby. Stewie plays the part of Nick Carraway, who's just moved to Long Island and hears a wild party going on next door. He goes on to investigate the commotion and runs into Jay Gatsby, who's actually just Brian in a suit and a blonde wig. Now, even though Brian's just met Stewie in this timeline, he decides to share something deeply personal with him. He's in love with a girl named Daisy Buchanan, who happens to be Stewie's cousin. Stewie decides to help Brian meet Daisy by inviting both of them to his house for tea. We find out that Daisy is actually just a Lois, which makes sense, because who else could she be? Meg? I'm sorry. When Lois and Brian meet, their old romance gets rekindled, and they set off to tour the fancy mansion he just bought next door. Something special is definitely brewing between them, but there's a problem. Lois is already married to Tom Buchanan, aka Peter, who tries to one-up Brian by showing off his own fancy mansion and then talking the whole gang to a hotel room where he buys super fancy champagne. That's where Lois ends up getting absolutely smashed and decides to drive Brian's car home. Sadly, Bonnie's standing in the middle of the road and gets run over, and Joe seems to think that it's all Brian's fault. He heads over to the mansion where he finds Brian at the pool, and bang! 3 shots straight through the poor dog, and Stewie's just left swimming in the pool with no one to congratulate him on getting his head underwater for the first time. So that's the end of Gatsby, but Peter's ready to move on to the next story, Huckleberry Finn. This time around, Peter plays the title character, while Chris plays Tom Sawyer, and Stewie, he plays Pap, Huck's abusive alcoholic father. So he's officially reached middle age already. Stewie spends his time drinking and whipping Peter every chance he gets, and things are so bad that Peter fakes his own death and runs away. A nice little role reversal there, but Peter still has one story left to tell, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Here, Stewie and Chris are a couple of hobos trying to make their way across America. Their goal? Opening a bed and breakfast in the countryside. They get jobs at Phelps Ranch, which happens to be owned by Peter, who shows some questionable judgment by gifting Chris a puppy that he promptly crushes to death. Apart from that, though, things go pretty swell for the guys. Stewie gets all dressed up to go to a local piano bar to sing on stage, but whilst he's gone, Chris accidentally snaps Meg's neck when she comes onto him. Gross on so many levels. Stewie rushes and finds Chris by a tree where he shoots him in the head to save him from getting hanged. The end. What a roller coaster of an episode, honestly. And number 3, The Birthday Bootlegger, where Stewie gets a taste of life on the inside and comes out meaner than ever. He kicks off this episode by browsing the bookshelf at his preschool, where he finds a book that inspires him to pull a prank. Unfortunately, this prank gives his classmate a nosebleed, and since this is his 3rd strike, his teacher puts him in detention. The next morning, Stewie finds out that detention is actually held in the elementary school building and freaks out because that's where all the big kids are. As soon as he gets to the detention room, he's surrounded by the meanest looking 5-year-olds you've ever seen. All he wants is a pacifier, and he moseys on over to a quiet kid at the back to ask if he can help him out. Turns out that this kid knows all about Stewie and why he's in detention, because he makes it his business to know everything. Yep, he's basically just Morgan Freeman's character from The Shawshank Redemption. Stewie eventually makes it through detention and gets released, but it's safe to say that it's changed Stewie pretty drastically. He shows up at home wearing a suit and a trilby and acts like he's been in jail for decades, even though he's basically just spent a day inside a classroom. Yeah, he's a real tough guy now, and the toothpick he has hanging from his mouth at breakfast proves it. He calls Chris fresh meat and comes on to him in a pretty creepy way, but that's just the tip of the dang iceberg. Stewie later corners Chris in his bedroom, approaches him menacingly, and forces him to watch a weird kids cartoon. Oh, the horror! Brian finds Stewie threatening to shiv Rupert, and when he asks him what's going on, Stewie reveals just how traumatized he is by his stint in detention. Apparently, some kid got his nose and never gave it back, and Stewie breaks down in tears at the memory. Luckily, Lois is able to put Stewie into a bubble bath that perks him right up, but when he turns around, he reveals a massive tattoo all across his back. That's when it's revealed that the whole episode was just old Stewie telling his grandkids about the time he got hepatitis. Spoiler alert, he shared the tattoo needle with Ben Affleck, who happens to be one dirty son of a gun. One of his grandkids then asks him about the time he met other granddad, pretty much confirming what we already knew about Stewie's preferences. The conversation then veers into him asking if Stewie's a top or bottom, but I doubt any of us want to get into that right now. And besides, the dude refuses to answer, even when he's told that all of his kids at school are asking about it. And number 2, Rich Old Stewie gives us a glimpse of how powerful and downright cruel Stewie can get as he grows old. This episode takes us way into the future when Stewie's a rich old man with a hunky butler who tells him that his Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony is coming up. Stewie heads to the ceremony where we find out that he's become famous for inventing the, wipeless dump? Strange concept, but hey, apparently it saved the rainforests. As he's giving his award speech, in walks someone he recognizes from his past, Brian, who's looking like he hasn't aged a day. This also happens to be Stewie's doing, because he invented a pill that extended Brian's lifespan and snuck it into Brian's food. Also, he could prove to him that global warming was a lie. Anyway, we find out that Stewie hasn't spoken to his family in about 50 years. He ran away because he just couldn't take their weird expectations anymore, like asking them to do the shocker in a family photo. If you don't know what that is, preserve your innocence and do not Google it. Now, Brian's there to tell Stewie that Peter's on his deathbed. How the fat man's lived this long we'll never know, but Stewie's so upset that he agrees to see
him. They pick Chris up on the way from the filthiest house you'll ever see, along with Meg, who spends her time testing faulty bulletproof vests. After driving through Quahog, which has become a glittering technological marvel by this point, they arrive at the Griffin home, which has clearly seen better days. Peter has also seen better days, with Stewie and everyone else finding him barely clinging to life on a hospital bed. Stewie feels some serious survivor's guilt after seeing his dad like this, and Peter asks him to take care of the family once he's gone. Stewie takes his request seriously, giving the house a sweet new coat of paint and everything, and after Peter passes away, he promises to give his family all his money. But pretty much as soon as he leaves, they all start laughing and Peter hops out of bed. Turns out that the whole thing was a ruse to get their grubby mitts on Stewie's fortune. But of course, Stewie's way too smart to be fooled so easily. He snuck into the kitchen and turned on the gas, so just as the family light their celebratory cigars, the entire house blows up and turns them into bloody bits on the street. Only Brian is left alive because Stewie's pills won't let him die, but he can still feel all of the pain. Except the whole thing turns out to be Stewie's sick fantasy. He's been staring at an old man costume for the whole episode and imagining what it would be like for him in the future. There's just no end to how twisted this kid's brain can be. And at number 1, the most interesting man in the world, Peter Griffin's quest for culture turns him into an insufferable D-bag. Lois decides to spend some time with Bonnie, which means that Peter's in charge of Stewie for the day. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, I know, but he seems to do alright at first, even taking Stewie to the park instead of plopping him in front of the TV. But it takes all but about 5 minutes for Peter to get bored out of his mind, and as it so happens, the drunken clam is right next to the park. Peter, being a man of absolutely zero self-control, ends up going to the clam and getting wasted instead of taking care of his son. By the time he realizes how long it's been, he heads back, and Stewie's nowhere to be found. Except Peter seems to think some random baby on a swing is his own child. He picks the kid up and heads off, leaving the real Stewie all alone in the park. Stewie thinks he's going to die there as an old man.
Peter realizes that there has to be a mix-up when he gets home, but when he sees Lois returning, he figures he can just try to pass the baby off as Stewie. Of course, she immediately realizes what happened, but fortunately the kid's parents also picked up Stewie and brought him back for a really weird hostage swap. Lois is understandably angry at Peter and calls him an idiot to his face, which actually inspires him to travel and see the world. He wants to become a cultured man, someone worthy of Lois's affections, so when the company offers to send him on a trip to Chicago, he jumps at the opportunity. He realizes that business trips don't usually involve that much business. It's mostly just a meeting or two, followed by tons of free time. So Peter starts signing up for every business trip he can. Pretty soon, he's traveled all over the place, and he suddenly arrives back home looking and talking all fancy. This might sound cool at first, but when he replaces the TV with a bookshelf and starts getting super full of himself, his family wants nothing more than for him to get back to his former self. Lois and Brian figure that if they can send Peter to the dumbest city in America, maybe they can reverse some of the insufferable intelligence he's acquired from his trips to San Francisco and New York. What's the dumbest city in America, you ask? Why, Tucson, Arizona, of course. As soon as Peter arrives there, he gets a kick in the nuts, and it seems to do the trick. He comes back acting like his good old dumb self, even farting his way through the door just as God intended. If we missed any episodes, then let us know in the comments, and we'll make a part 2.